Always true.
Israeli forces have been bombarding the Gaza Strip every day since last October. Tens of thousands of Palestinians have been killed and many more severely injured. But what's been particularly devastating is Israel's targeting of Gaza's hospitals and medical facilities. Its forces have killed medics and humanitarian workers, making it even more difficult to provide services to Palestinians. Now, vast areas of the Strip are in ruins. There is little medical care, and many are facing starvation. To shed light on these pressing issues and more, the president of the Palestinian Red Crescent Society, Younis Khatib, talks to Al Jazeera. Dr. Younis Khatib, thank you for talking to Al Jazeera.
Pleasure, thank you.
PRCS's staff sometimes work under very difficult and complex conditions. Your organization works in Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, and of course the occupied Palestinian territories. In comparison to all the other crises you and your team have dealt with, how bad is it in Gaza right now and how challenging has it been?
Well, thank you very much for having me on Al Jazeera. Well, PRCS, Palestine Red Crescent, its faith has been to work with Palestinian refugees all over the region, whether in, as you said, in Egypt, in Iraq, in Syria, and in Lebanon, as well as the Palestinian territories in occupied Gaza, West Bank, and Jerusalem. Since 1968, this has been a tough job to deal with. It has been painful. Agony, losing colleagues throughout these years was not an easy thing to hear news of losing a friend or a colleague while delivering services. Yes, we have learned a lot throughout these 56 years. Maybe might be the pioneer in the region for saving lives under conflict and battle. But that is nothing to be really proud of. It is something that built in with agony, with fear, with pain. But the satisfying part of it is really when you save a life, you feel you have done something, you have achieved something, you have delivered part of your humanity to others.
In February of this year, you visited Gaza, your first visit since the start of this war. What did you find there?
Well, I would have loved to stay in Gaza for a longer period. I would have loved to visit more than once, but unfortunately, this was the only possibility for me to be a member of the delegation of the president of the International Federation of the Red Cross Red Crescent. And this shows the limitations we have. The Israeli measures that prevent Palestinian humanitarian workers from moving freely in the country. What I've seen there in the eyes of children is something untalkable, is something that cannot be described. At that time, Rafah was still a place receiving refugees and displaced populations from North Gaza. It was packed. Services were very much limited. Aid was very much limited. Access of our medical staff was very much limited. We have managed. Was just after the closure of our hospital in Gaza City, Al-Quds Hospital. We have managed, just as I got into Rafah, to open our field hospital there. We called it Al-Quds 2, to serve the displaced population, to provide the basic services, actually. For those displaced, there were not many services there, especially hospitalization. The situation now, I'm sure, is much worse than what we had seen, and it was very much limited. We did not see all the suffering that takes place. We did not see all the restrictions that the Israelis impose in the movement of people, and the red areas, we were not allowed to move into the red areas. We could not reach to our hospital in Khan Younis itself.
So what you're saying is that you were restricted. You were restricted by the Israelis in terms of your movements at the time.
That's right. We were totally restricted on only just.
Let me ask you this then. Since, of course, that trip in February, the Rafah border crossing was effectively shut down, closed by the Israelis when they took it over in May. What impact has had that closure? What impact has it had on your operations in the south?
Well, I think that hit hard all the humanitarian agencies in working in Gaza, whether north or south. It hit the UN agencies, the International Red Cross. We were all affected by this closure. The Rafah border is the main border, the main route of humanitarian aid into Gaza. Shutting that meant most of the aid that was getting into Gaza was prohibited from moving into Gaza freely. What really we witness, and when it comes to entry points into Gaza, is that the Israelis are playing games with us. There are so many names being thrown around, like Kerem Shalom, like Kosefim, like Rafah border, and sometimes opening the Ashdod port, the Jordan route. And in reality, when you look at the quantity of what gets in from all those entry points, it's even less than what was getting in from Rafah border itself. So the reality, it has never improved getting humanitarian aid into Gaza. On the contrary, it was decreasing. And we can see now how much this aid has decreased. The little aid that is coming from Zakim into North Gaza is very much limited.
When you say limited, can you give us an idea from what you're hearing in terms of, for example, the number of trucks that have gone in recently, or what type of aid are the Israelis allowing in?
Yeah, they're limited in number of trucks, yes, not more than 50 trucks at the most that goes into this crossing. The other restriction is that settlers, Israelis, will obstruct these trucks, and from time to time they might throw out from the trucks all the humanitarian aid that is loaded on those trucks, burn them or throw them in the streets. In the end, what goes in, this is what I mean, limited. When we talk about 50 or 100 trucks even, this is nothing to the needs that people have in Gaza.
From your knowledge, has any aid been allowed in from the Rafah border crossing specifically since it was taken over by the Israelis in May?
Since the 7th of May, nothing came through Rafah border.
Is it your assessment, Dr. Khatib, that a humanitarian operation in the Rafah governorate in particular still exists at this point?
In Rafah governorate, or Rafah city in particular, most operations, humanitarian operations, of ours or others has been closed. It ceased to function. For example, I'll give you one field hospital. It's open but inaccessible. Nobody can reach to the hospital. Our ambulances that were stationed in that area has been forced out, completely out of Rafah area. Our clinics or medical posts in the region were closed completely. There are no medical or health facilities that can provide any services in Rafah area are open yet. The Kuwait hospital is closed. We had to move our field hospital, Al-Quds hospital that I talked about, from Rafah area to Khan Younis, Mawasi Khan Younis. So literally, there are no services in that region.
Okay, and if we go further up, you just mentioned Khan Younis, so you have some operations still functioning in Khan Younis?
Yes, in Khan Younis we have we brought back to work our hospital, Al-Amal Hospital in Khan Younis city, which was closed by the Israelis and forced us out by the Israeli army a few months ago. And in April, we managed to reopen the hospital again. It is functioning. I can tell you a very happy story of having over in June. We had 392 deliveries. Births, new kids were born in the hospital. And this is a relief, and it is happy because at least part of these women suffering can have a place to deliver or have safe deliveries in a more healthy, medically equipped center to deliver. We still have our hospital and field hospital working, and we have medical posts as well as our ambulance stations.
And if we just go further north to the center as well, the center and the northern part of Gaza, are there functional PRCS medical points or facilities available in these areas?
Well, just going back to Khan Younis, we had to close 2 of our clinics because the Israelis consider the area in the east part of Khan Younis a red area. In Deir al-Balah and the middle area, yes, we still have our major medical facility there still functioning. It's a polyclinic, and Deir al-Balah still working. We have medical posts. The area has been densely occupied by displaced populations. There is no place for any more tents to be placed in that region. So we are focusing a lot in medical posts and clinics in that region to serve those displaced population of hundreds of thousands that don't have a place to go to. So now we are moving, anything we moved from Rafah area has been placed in Khan Younis or Deir al-Balah regions.
And Dr. Khatib, what are the most critical shortages that are being faced by your organization in Gaza in order to be able to help the people there?
Everything there's a large shortage in everything. When we talk about food, with this closure, with no routes, with Rafah being closed, no other route or entry point can replace Rafah. Till now, yes, there's huge shortages in food. There's huge shortages in medicine and medical supplies. There are shortages in really repairing installations related to water, to sanitation. There are, especially in North Gaza, the situation is dire there. We are talking about, we are on the brink of chronic malnutrition for children in many places in the Gaza Strip. Yes, there is a disaster. There is a catastrophe taking place right now with this minimal humanitarian aid that comes into Gaza.
From what you're hearing from your teams on the ground, sir, how would you say that there is currently famine in Gaza? I mean, we heard from the UNRWA Commissioner General Philippe Lazzarini back in April. He said this, that a man-made famine is tightening its grip on the Strip. What's your assessment as to whether there really is a famine taking place?
Let me say the following. All aspects of life in Gaza Strip is facing a terrible situation and can get worse. If we are not in a famine, when you're talking about definitions, international definitions, but there are cases dying from famine. This has been proven. We are in the way, in the road for things to get worse. When regard to the health of babies, when it comes to the health of women giving deliveries or otherwise, when it comes to the health of the whole population in Gaza, It is not, when you're talking about water and sanitation, the infrastructure is completely destroyed in the Gaza Strip. So, of course, in one way or another, communicable diseases is spreading in Gaza. And these are evident that has been proven of cases of communicable diseases. And children are the most susceptible to get these diseases in such a situation.
What about the state of hospitals, which are, of course, supposed to be protected places under international law? We know that they have been repeatedly targeted by Israeli forces, including PRCS's hospitals. How are you, as president of the organization, pushing for accountability?
Nothing has been protected in Gaza. Not the civilians, before talking about humanitarian workers or relief workers, hospitals, ambulances, nothing has been protected. International law has not been respected. Number one, civilians should be avoided such terrible situation. Under international law, they are the first group that need protections. I'll tell you one thing that the Israeli army achieved in this war. I think it was an undeclared objective for the war, is the destruction of the health system in Palestine, in Gaza in particular. Because when I talk about Palestine, even in the West Bank, there's a systematic program that they have to destroy the healthcare system in Palestine.
Another issue that you've spoken about, I mean, you've just told us about how you believe that Israel is conducting a systematic destruction of health facilities. But I know that you've also said that your teams have been deliberately targeted in Gaza. We know that according the death toll among your paramedics and personnel since the war began is 33, 19 of those who were killed while performing their duty. And in your most recent report, you say the deliberate targeting of the medical mission represents a grave infringement of international humanitarian law, violating the Geneva Convention. First of all, I just want to ask you why you say this is deliberate. And second of all, have you raised this with the Israelis, with the Palestinian Authority, with the United States, with the international community? Again, I'm asking about the question of accountability. What have you done about this?
Well, I say deliberate because it is deliberate, and this is nothing new to us. Our history has proved with the Israelis that medical services, humanitarian services, are regularly targeted with no reason to do so. And I think the story of Hind, the little girl that was in her family's car being targeted, and the two PRCS paramedics that reached there to try and save her, after 3 hours of talking to our dispatch center, and this was the longest call ever in the history of PRCS, where our psychologists were trying to comfort a 6-year-old girl under such brutal, unimaginable situation. Really, a little girl in front of a tank or tanks. How would you feel about it? No, she was targeted. And our ambulance, which is clearly marked, was also targeted. And we have lost, yes, I think, just to correct the number, 34 of our colleagues in this war, 19 of them in action. In the West Bank also, during this period, we have lost 2 of our volunteers, clearly targeted. Sorry to say, after 9 months, when we talk about accountability, all these violations against international law, Geneva Conventions, everything that humanity stands for. And everything possible has been done. Everybody knows about it. The UN, the Security Council, the Court of Justice, the Criminal Court, and decisions were taken, rulings were taken. And still we are not there. Why not taking sanctions against Israel? In other situations, sanctions came 24 hours after events. Now, after 9 or 10 months, why till now Israel is not sanctioned? We all know what is happening. And there are good enough rulings, court rulings and resolutions to stop this war. And Israel has not respected any of that. It's a shame on the international community, to be very frank, because nobody can say they did not know.
Going back to the story of Hind Rajab, Dr. Al-Khatib, I did want to ask you about that particular incident because I think it was one of the most prominent incidents of the past few months, and it really gripped many people around the world. I mean, you correctly say that your staff was on the phone with her for at least 3 hours before she was shot and before she died, succumbing to her wounds. And then your staff that went to try to save her were shot and killed by the Israelis. I mean, the trauma endured by your staff must be immense. So how do you, as an organization, address the psychological toll that this is taking on your own workers, and what sort of support systems are there in place for them?
You know, let me also tell you a story of one of the stories that shocked me a lot. It happened with me in the second Intifada, when our ambulance in Jenin camp or Jenin city was targeted. And the director of our EMS station, the Dr. Suleiman, was killed. It was targeted with a rocket because the whole ambulance exploded. And he was burnt, completely burnt. And 2 volunteers, young volunteers, were with him in the car, also were burnt, but they lived afterwards. One of them told me, look, you have taught us, like this emblem of the Red Cross or Red Crescent is like a bulletproof shield. If we wear it, we'll be protected and we'll be respected. Sorry, you were wrong. You cheated us. You know, when this your staff, your volunteers tell you you have cheated us. But they went on. They did not stop. I'll tell you something. It seems the tough job we have will be after this war is ending.
What do you mean by that?
Because then the real trauma will be seen. Then the real problems, the real suffering of people will come out. How to deal with it. Yes, during the war, people might be carried on with the urge, with the duty to save lives. These young people, those medical staff, doctors, nurses, on all the hospitals, and they want to do their jobs. There are foreign doctors who refused, or Palestinians with foreign passports, refused to leave just to try and save lives. There is a mission there that needs to be accomplished.
But of course, the humanitarian needs, as you're saying, are going to be immense once this war is actually over. And I know that you've launched a second emergency appeal as of March. It was only 20% funded. Correct me if I'm wrong here. What's at stake for you if your appeals are not fully funded? And can you keep going on without the funds?
Thanks for talking about the appeal. And just not to correct figure, but to add another information. Yes, our appeal was 20% funded, but this is the cash funding. More than 35% was in-kind funding to the appeal. And that is very important also. The point is, after a while, and I'm one person who addressed some donors in some meetings, asking them to keep the money in their accounts. If we cannot get all this in kind or use the cash to get it into Gaza, what is the use? In the other side of the border, in the Rafah border, in the Egyptian side, there are over 4,000 trucks waiting. So what is the use of having money and not being able to use? This has been a tragedy for us. And this is where the international community, you know, we don't want to see donors, sorry to say that, just comforting their conscience by sending an airplane landing in Al Arish and bye-bye, thank you, and then we are not able to send it into Gaza.
Right.
This is happening.
One final question, one final thought from you, Dr. Al-Khatib. Let me ask you about yourself personally, because you started out as a volunteer at the organization in 1982, and then you held numerous senior positions, and eventually you were elected president in the year 2000. What's next for you?
I'm still a volunteer now, and I will never give up volunteering for a humanitarian cause, and I can't find any other place now that needs all of our efforts. I'm very happy to see all those internationals coming to provide their humanitarian assistance to Palestine. The Palestinians deserve not just a humanitarian aid. Here we are not talking about a humanitarian crisis in Palestine. This is a political crisis. This is a conflict that started over 100 years ago. For me personally, I think this is a cause that I am happy to serve, at least what is left from my life.
Dr. Younis Khatib, president of the Palestine Red Crescent Society, thank you for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.